So I want to welcome everybody to the Friday Sex and Relationship Healing webinar, where you're going to ask me questions, any questions at all regarding either your own recovery from betrayal trauma or from addiction. Today, we're going to talk about something that, like I always bring to Fridays, something that shows up in group or in my office. And this past week, I had an interesting dialogue with a group member in talking about how long am I going to have to be living this way? And when will the addict ever? When will my husband ever? So we're going to talk a little bit about accountability and how it helps to create relational healing. So I'm going to talk about it both from the addict's perspective today, as well as from the betrayed partners. Lots of times I will have clients come in or group members come in and ask me, how long is this going to last? How much longer will there be the ups and downs? And so, as a brief reminder, through the lenses of Prodependence, we're looking at this through that human dependency need that we all have. And as the partner who's got a loved one with an addiction, they're caught up in circumstances that are beyond their control at times, as well as their ability to cope in a healthy way. So this client comes into group and she's sharing that she's having a very difficult time regulating because she's not seeing accountability. And part of that accountability that she needs to see is creating inconsistency in the addict's recovery, and is causing her to go into a lot of safety seeking, which is the behaviors that we talk about that oftentimes betrayed partners go into in order to create that safety or that security. It helps them to know whether or not their addict partner is safe for them to move towards, or if they need to move away in order to create that safety. So we're going to talk about accountability. So just simply accountability means giving an account. It means telling the betrayed partner, being willing to tell the betrayed partner what you did or didn't do in your recovery work, in your previous acting out, and we'll talk about some framework around that. It's also giving straightforward and honest answers, regardless of what the outcome may be. Oftentimes I hear addict partners say that they're trying to help manage the betrayed partner's emotions, so they only give part of the answer, or they kind of circle around the truth and kind of circle around for a while, and then eventually they may get to what the exact truth is. So the areas that a betrayed partner needs complete accountability in are things like time. Where are you at? When will you be home? What are you spending your time on? Money. How are you spending money? A lot of times this is a trigger for the betrayed partners. The relationships you have, not only with them, but accountability to family, to the people you associate with, who you associate with, the goals that you have, especially regarding recovery. That's very helpful for the betrayed partner to know, and for you to be accountable on that, to share that. Technology, how are you using it? What are you using? What are the frameworks that you put around that for safety for your partner? Being accountable and being willing to do that. And then lastly, recovery work in general. And that includes even your lack of doing it. You've got to be accountable for that as well. So one of the rules of thumb for an addict partner should be that if a betrayed partner asks for any information, do your best in that moment to be willing and ready to give the highest amount of openness and honesty as possible. And if you can do that consistently over time, then trust begins to be rebuilt. So we're going to go through 10 areas. We're going to talk about 10 things that you can do to be accountable as an addict partner and the effect that it has on the betrayed partner. So number one is, don't minimize what you've done, whether it's in regards to your past acting out, your current behaviors, both of those. It's important for you to be out of denial so that you don't rationalize what you're accountable for, because you've got to recognize that when you minimize it, the betrayed partner knows, and they are going to react to that. Remember that the betrayed partner is experiencing trauma, And so if you can look at her through those lenses and understand that she may be having a reaction because her brain's gone offline, because she's experiencing trauma. Trauma takes us into our body. So we're feeling this overwhelm where we don't have the ability to have logic and reasoning in that moment. And so the betrayed partner may go into some of her trauma responses. Don't downplay the choices that you've made. Don't say to her things like, well, it was only 10 minutes of porn this time. It's a whole lot better than what it used to be. Or, gosh, at least I'm not doing this. This guy in my group, he's done far worse than I have. That's minimizing. The addict partner needs to acknowledge and recognize the severity of the betrayed partner's pain. And you can't do that if you're minimizing. So be aware of that. Even go to your betrayed partner and ask them, do I minimize? And then be open and willing to sit and hear what the betrayed partner has to say. Secondly, don't justify what you've done. There is no justification for any of the sexual acting out or acting out with any addiction. Now, there may be factors that contribute to what makes the addict partner susceptible to sexual betrayal and to their addiction, but the bottom line is that it is their choice. And so if you can recognize that and be clear with that and make that known to your betrayed partner, it helps so much in her healing journey. Justifying means that the addict partner is still dealing with some of their own shame and their own denial. So my recommendation is go in, work with your group on that, work with your individual therapist on that, and identify how that is showing up in your life. Third idea, don't make your betrayed partner the problem. Your addiction is. That's the problem. So the betrayed partner may go into safety-seeking behaviors, which may at time may seem like they are dealing with their own mental health struggles. That's not how you approach the betrayed partner. So it's best not to address any of those struggles or make her at fault because she's in a trauma response. That takes a lot of awareness on the addict partner's part. I would suggest, if you don't have clarity on that, go ask your individual therapist about that. How can I recognize when my partner's in trauma and that her behaviors are a result of this trauma? It's not who she is. It's her reaction in that moment to what she thinks is the best solution to creating safety. So don't find fault in any aspect or area of the betrayed partner's life, whether it's her own healing recovery work, whether it's in regards to how she's keeping the house, how she's taking care of herself. We don't want to assign fault in any way to the betrayed partner. And I know it takes a lot of willpower at times when we're in the thick of it to not turn the tables and kind of start pointing out what the betrayed partner isn't doing right. So what you can do is you can create safety when this happens. And we're going to talk in a minute about how to specifically create safety. Another thing, number 4, if the addict partner would learn just to be transparent, in fact, volunteer to be transparent, don't make the betrayed partner ask for it or wait for her to ask for it, because that is very, very difficult at times for the betrayed partner to know how to do it. Oftentimes they do it when they're in the middle of a limbic response, meaning they're in fight, flight, or freeze, and it typically doesn't go well. So what does being transparent in a very voluntary way look like? It means that you go to your betrayed partner and you ask her, what do you need transparency in? What areas? So you might ask them, what kind of access do you need to my phone, to my computer, to email, to bank accounts, to my wallet, to the car? Think of all the areas and aspects of your life. Share any passcodes. If you've had extra email accounts that she's not aware of, make her aware and then delete them and show her that you've deleted them. Maybe do it with her. Be very, very transparent. If you don't have anything to hide, then you will want to be transparent in everything in your life. And that's everything from what you do at work to who you go to lunch with. You've got to be transparent in any of the areas that your betrayed partner needs you to be transparent in. Okay, number 5, take responsibility for your own recovery. Don't be motivated by your betrayed partner's insistence, her nagging, her threatening, her pleading. You need to do your own recovery on your own. So, what does that look like? Go in and talk it over with your therapist. If you're in a group where you're intentionally working on addiction and porn recovery, you should have specific steps. They will give you materials that help you to understand what you need to do and then do it. Share it with your partner what you're doing. Find a CSAT therapist, somebody who's qualified. Make your own appointments. Don't rely on your betrayed partner to do that for you or to remind you that you need to do it. Do it on your own. What I find with my clients and my group members is when they come and report to me that their addict partner has made their own appointments and is consistently going to group, that creates so much safety. I see a correlation. I see a reduction in their safety-seeking behaviors that are on the unhealthier side. So it's a win-win all the way around. Research your 12-step groups. Go and attend regularly. Make sure that you've got some type of a responsibility or an accountability partner, somebody who holds you responsible, who keeps you accountable, and don't make that be your betrayed partner. That is a lot of responsibility. I worked with somebody this past week, and as we were talking about support, it came to my awareness that a lot of her husband's support is her, and a lot of her support is her husband. And we need people outside of that relationship because our partners cannot meet every need for us, especially when we're working in our recovery from addiction and from betrayal trauma. So it's really important that you have your people you can turn to. Let your betrayed partners see you working on your recovery materials. Again, I hear women come in and say, I'm seeing him work in the workbook, or they'll come in and say, I never see him work. I'm wondering if he's even doing what he's supposed to be doing. So they start to question. Another area where I see that sometimes the addict partners have a little resistance is in being willing to do check-ins on a regular basis. We just held kind of an introductory group to our program last night. And one of the things that was mentioned was the fact that check-ins are a way where we can coordinate where we're at to give each other a snapshot of what's going on in our lives and in our recovery work in that moment. I find that the betrayed partners really want to do check-in. Check-ins in our framework looks like 15 to 30 minutes. My recommendation is 15. If you need a little more time, add 15 minutes. And then you're going to check in and you're going to share. For example, one word like you do in group of how you're feeling emotionally, physically, spiritually, and relationally. And then you're going to share what you're working on in your recovery work. We worked on shame this week. I'm really recognizing my shame. Here's what I've learned it looks like. And both partners share what your struggles have been. Have I had struggles with safety seeking? Have I had some struggles in my sobriety? And what am I doing about it so that you can feel safe? And then I like my partners to also ask, what's one thing you need from me this week? Right? What's one way I can show up for you? And so we can change that around. We can make it very simple. If there's something that you need to discuss in further detail, my recommendation is that you set up another time to do that. Or if you're still, well-fed, well-rested, and grounded, then you can add another 15 minutes. And I love to go to, here's where I'm feeling the deep, deep feelings and emotions, and here's what I need from you. Here's what it looks like. Instead of getting caught up in stories, can I go to what I need for the safety, the security, for the support in my healing and in my recovery work? Another thing is sign up and put monitoring devices on all of your technology. This is an area of resistance I see with the addict partners as well, because I know it is not easy at times to have something on there that monitors because it messes with your devices. There's always a way to figure out how to use it, and it's worth the effort, the extra effort, because it creates safety for you as the addict partner, and it creates safety for the betrayed partner. Do your recovery work willingly and be committed. and remind your betrayed partner on a regular basis that you are committed to working on healing and recovering from your addiction and doing what you need to do to bring the two of you back together. Number 6, give the betrayed partner space for safety and healing. The betrayed partner needs the addict partner to give them the time and space for their own healing. So you may see that she has a lot of trauma responses. She may go into some unhealthy or safety seeking. Ask what you can do to help create safety for her. Don't criticize her lack of recovery. Ask what you can do to support. Ask her if she's open to suggestions, which might be, have you turned to your group? Have you been in to see your therapist? What does your therapist say? So approach that very openly, but ask if you can. Because when a betrayed partner is having a trauma response, it's all about creating safety in the moment and then circling back around to finding out what you can do to help her become more grounded and help her feel safe again. Okay. At times it may feel like rejection when the betrayed partner needs space. I'm going to challenge you to reframe it to something a little different. And that is that your partner is creating safety by moving away from you momentarily so they can figure out what they need in order to return back to you. So at times it feels really difficult. I know that there are times where betrayed partners need their addict partner to sleep in another room or even find another place to stay momentarily for short term or even for several months. But the addict partner needs to be willing to take the time out whenever the betrayed partner needs you to. What I find is oftentimes when partners are trying to work things through, they may be a little more limbic. One of the partners tries to call a timeout for 20 minutes or an hour or two, and maybe the addict partner wants to continue working on getting a solution to the problem that you can't get a solution to when you're limbic. So when your partner asks for a timeout, honor that. And as you take that time out, just check in and see when you can come back together so that you know that you're going to come back together to work on it. Volunteer and offer to give your betrayed partner space. So betrayed partners oftentimes need you to show up and take care of the children while they go to group. Maybe letting them go and take a walk around the block when you first come home because they've had all these stressors and they're already experiencing betrayal trauma. So remember, their window of tolerance, how much stress they can take is much lower. And don't pressure her. Don't pressure her on how she does her recovery, and don't put a time limit on how quickly she needs to recover. And the same goes for the betrayed partners. They should honor that same, that same boundary with their addict partner. Okay. Number 7, listen and hold space for your betrayed partner's emotions. So you're going to want to listen when the betrayed partner is having a bad day, when she gets angry, when she goes off on you. So this requires that you've got to really work on your grounding skills and tools, and that you've got to just sit there and hold space. The analogy I use with my clients is, to me, holding space is like, I'm going to let my partner's emotions go into this bucket I'm holding right here. I'm just going to notice those emotions as they go in, and I'm going to try to recognize them, relate to them. And I'm not the sponge. I'm not soaking them in and taking them on and taking them personally. So I'm going to hold space for them, allow them to have those emotions, because emotions typically will run their course. We'll talk in a moment about the fact that at times, when emotions are on the higher range, like rage, there needs to be boundaries put around that. So in those times, we do need to put some safety boundaries in place, and we need to take a time out until everybody's calmed down. It's really important that as you're holding space that you attune. And so we talk about attunement oftentimes in couples work. And attunement, if you use attunement as the acronym, it stands for being aware of your partner's feelings and the experience they're having. So that's the A. The T stands for tolerance, recognizing that there are 2 different perspectives and both are valid. The other T stands for turning toward your partner. So you're going to recognize that your partner has a need and you want to turn toward your partner with a willingness to try to help meet that need. It's really important. The U stands for understanding. So I'm going to attempt to understand my partner's experience and their perspective. I don't have to agree with it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my very best to try to understand it. The N stands for non-defensive listening. So I'm going to listen to my partner's perspective and I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And if I don't agree, I'm going to just kind of hold that for later when it's my turn to share, how I see it. But we don't want to get defensive because then it just creates disconnection. And then the E is empathy. I love empathy. Empathy is I'm going to really focus on the emotions that my client's sharing that they're having. I'm going to try to relate to those emotions, and that's where I'm going to head. Rather than the story she's saying or the facts she's sharing, I'm going to acknowledge the emotions that she's telling me that she's having. So acknowledge her pain and allow her to have it. Don't try to fix it. I know oftentimes we want to fix it so we can get it figured out and move on from it. But instead, turn to your partner and ask, what do you need from me right now? What do you need from me tomorrow? So have your betrayed partner be specific. If her request is feasible, then you're going to do it. If not, negotiate it. But the important thing is you make sure that you follow through on whatever you agree to do. Okay, number 8, don't expect kind words, gifts, limited recovery efforts in a short amount of time to fix her, fix the situation, and fix the relationship. So with betrayal trauma, the betrayed partner feels like the world as she knew it has collapsed around her. So it takes time for that to be repaired. So the addict partner may do nice things for the betrayed partner, and you might find that sometimes that betrayed partner gets angry. It's not the reaction or the response you'd hope for. So just know that that's part of it. It takes time. And if you can just recognize that time, as hard as it is to kind of recognize that it's not a quick fix, if you can just hold on to consistency over time, that is such a key to rebuilding trust. So it's consistent recovery work over time. So that's where trust gets reestablished. The betrayed partner has a lot of pain, so they may not be able to have pain in the moment and also be appreciative. So just recognize that. So do it consistently, like I said. Number 9, don't expect her to celebrate your recovery efforts, your sobriety, and cheer you on as you go down that road to recovery. It might take a while. Like I said earlier, it takes time. So while recovery work will be some of the most difficult things that you ever do, mention some of those milestones to your betrayed partner. If you need more and you need somebody to cheer you on, turn to your support groups, turn to your sponsor, turn to your therapist, turn to the group members where they can cheer you on. We all need that. And hopefully as a relationship is repairing, then you'll have the ability, both of you back and forth, as you're working on repairing the relationship, to do that for each other. You can mention some of these things in weekly check-ins, like I mentioned earlier, and that's a great time sometimes to say, I just want you to make you aware of where I'm at and what I've accomplished this week. And I feel, really happy about the fact that I've made it to this point. Okay. Number 10, offer to do a therapeutic disclosure. I'm going to tell you what shows up sometimes in my office. I have women come in and they'll say to me, my husband told me that his therapist says that we don't need to do a disclosure. Or my husband said that it would do more harm to do disclosure. So I don't think it's a good idea for us to do disclosure. Well, knowing the therapists that I know that work with the addict partners at our facility, they would never tell the addict partner not to do disclosure. What they would recommend is we do a therapeutic disclosure in the proper order, taking the time that it needs to prepare fully so that it becomes overall what those betrayed partners need in order to begin to reestablish trust. You want to work with a CSAT. You want to work with somebody who's done, therapeutic disclosures. They know how to do it. They've been trained in it. Don't require the betrayed partner to beg, to ask, to threaten. Just willingly do it. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult, but the betrayed partner needs that if she asks for it. Now, there are times where I have betrayed partners who say to me, I don't need it. And that's okay. But I always tell them that if at any time during your recovery you do need it, it's always an option. So be open and willing to do that. It's better to have that framework of a therapeutic disclosure in place rather than dumping things on her over time or little bits here and there. Sometimes trickling out the truth can be more damaging in the long run. A therapeutic disclosure, I find, while it's difficult and there is some recovery work that we have to do afterwards, in the long run, it serves a really great therapeutic purpose. Sometimes we need to put boundaries around what is shared prior to a therapeutic disclosure. So keep in mind and work together, you as the addict partner with the betrayed partner, to decide if we're going to do a therapeutic disclosure, what information do we wait and share at the disclosure. I've worked with somebody recently that we are preparing for a therapeutic disclosure, and her husband shared a slip recently. And so we kind of worked in session on determining, was that best for her? Or would it be better to have him wait and share some of those things when they get into recovery? And it was a past slip. Let me clarify that. It wasn't something that had happened currently. It was a past slip. And so she has determined that in the moment she wants to know. And so she's got some tools under her belt now. She has the ability, she's regulated most of the time. She does have days where she has to do a lot of some of her own recovery work to get regulated, but overall, she's much more regulated. So for her, that's the agreement they've come to. Other women who are experiencing betrayal trauma may say to their partner, share that with me in disclosure. I want my therapist to be there. I want to feel safe. I want to have people there to help me. So those are some of the things. So how do we implement it? Very briefly, we have to put this into practice. Number one, set the intention as the addict partner that you're going to be accountable. You have to tell yourself that you're willing to do that. You have to make that choice and that decision, and that you're doing it to reestablish safety and security in the relationship. Next, don't look at your betrayed partner through the lenses of being wrong or at fault for experiencing her trauma responses. That happens time and time again. I know it's hard. I know it's difficult when your betrayed partner does some crazy things and she does behaviors and maybe she uses language you've never heard her use before. Recognize it as a trauma response. When both of you are grounded, figure out the best way to approach your betrayed partner when this is happening. Next, discuss your accountability list with your betrayed partner. Go through it. Talk about, I'm working on my shame right now. I know it shows up like this. If you see this happening, bring it to my attention. And here's how I'd like you to do it. Say this to me. Or here's what I'm committing to regarding going in to see my therapist. Here's when I'm going to go do my 12-step group. Just go over all of that where you're going to try to be accountable. This is going to promote her betrayal trauma healing, and it's going to promote and create more connection in the relationship. Follow through on the things and your commitments every time. If you say you're going to be home at 6 o'clock, be home at 6 o'clock. If you're going to be late, you call her and tell her why. So be open, honest, transparent. Always keep in mind that healing from addiction and betrayal is not a quick fix. Accountability is key throughout that entire process, along with the consistent recovery work. And in the long run, this is a lifelong journey. It really is, of healing and recovery. But there's some wonderful byproducts. And what I am seeing in the couples in our practices as they're working on this, they are reestablishing and creating authentic relationships with authentic intimacy. And they are seeing their relationships, their marriages becoming much more healthier. So while it's a lot of hard work, there is so much good that can come from all of the work that you do. I believe in every aspect of your life. So anyway, that's some thoughts on accountability. That's how I see that betrayed partners can be assisted in their own recovery work and their healing by the addict partner.
So I do invite you to type your questions in at the bottom, but like I got my highlighter out because I was like, oh, I have to. So lots of stuff that I thought it was when you were talking about the betrayed partner and the addict being the support person for each other. And I know that often it's like, well, that's my person, but that betrayal trauma is in there and all of the lies. And so it's really difficult. So how do you help? Because if they really are their only people, and I honestly, I hear that often, how do you help them understand how critically important it is to have your peers and your support, so that they're able to find that space? I'm not saying it well, but you get what I mean? Like, how do you help them, kind of get the support from the people that they need to get the support from, and not just be the two of them?
So I will spend time in session and we kind of go through a series of, one of the things I talk about is we identify how they're turning to their partner for support.
Oh,
and at
okay.
times we're talking about, hey, how that's working or not working. So if it's not working, then we start to explore, is there somebody else that can meet that need in this moment for you? So then we start talking about healthy support. What are some of the qualities that somebody who can give you healthy support has? I talk about the concept of we can't turn to one person to meet every need. It's not realistic. I do share a little bit of my own experience, and that was that I people who help support me in different ways. So I give them some ideas on what that looks like. And typically, when I get to that point, the wheels in their mind have started turning and they can start identifying certain people. Oftentimes, the mistake that we make is we think that we need to find people that support us who have to know all of our story and what's happening. No, we can aspects of what we need as far as support or recovery, and we can turn to people for that. I've mentioned previously, I have a logical friend. So when I was really emotional and I couldn't think logically, she's the person I would turn to help me with logic. Whether it was with my kids, whether it was with my betrayal, she was my logical person. I had the person that I could go to and cry. And there was no judgment, and she would just let me say what I needed to say in that moment. And so we can all find people like that along the way. I have had a client say to me, well, he's the one who created this trauma in me and this pain. He's the one who needs to fix it, and only him. That's a hard place to be. I recognize that's what we want. And in the long run, that's what we're hoping will happen along the way, in an ideal world. But there's so many factors. And so the reality is that we can't rely on just one person to help us heal. We need a whole group. So I hope that answered your question.
No, that does help.
I really started exploring, and we identify one person. I challenge them to reach out to this one person. We kind of go over how they're going to reach out, what they're going to ask for. Sometimes I have them put support people on alert. So if this happens, can I turn to you and, ask you to do this, this, and this for me? And so we kind of put some boundaries around it. A lot of my betrayed partners, it's a struggle for them to reach out and express that they have a need and that they don't have the capacity to know how to handle it. A lot of us are that way. We may be wired that way from our childhood experiences, so that gets challenged. We may be one of those people that in the past we've been able to handle everything on our own, and so it's taking us outside our comfort zone. But I always find that the clients that do that are the ones that regulate quicker and their recovery is smoother. And I really see them grow so much more rapidly when they've got a system of people, a support group.
Oh, I absolutely do too. But I do know that sometimes there's that kind of like we're stuck together, and and I hear you with the like, well, I'm using he and she, but he did this, so he's got to fix it. But he in his brokenness did this, and he needs to get all his parts put back together again, so we have fantastic support on sexandrelationshiphealing.com with drop-in groups. And I've had partners who have been resistant to going there. I think part of it is shame. I think part of it is fear. And, it's going to be just a bunch of people, all in this terrible place. And what I find every time I sub in on those groups is these amazing, resilient people who are there for each other, looking to offer support. And, but, yeah, I've been through that. Here's what I did, so there's practical, like you said, the logic friend, I need somebody to help me sort this out. So, and then they connect with each other. Here's my phone number. You can call me afterwards. Like, I love that they're creating this safe space, to help each other. And same with addicts. I mean, we need the accountability, which is what you talked about, but we need the accountability and support. I thought it was interesting when you commented on the resistance to the monitoring. Like, I don't hear that as often. I have heard people, unfortunately, who decided to make themselves the accountability person, and then they just go on and do it. Like, so I'm gonna get the report, and then I'm gonna undo this so I don't have to see the negative report. So like, it only works if you're setting it up for accountability with somebody, ideally not your partner, who is getting the report. So your therapist, your peers, your sponsor, whatever. I loved the do it willingly too, because I hear so many partners that are going like, like they feel like they're nagging him to make the appointments, or they're making the appointments for the therapist, or they're, going, what meeting are you going to today, or whatever. And, and so it shifts everything when they see this person stepping into, I'm doing this because I want, I want to be different. I want you to see my actions as being different. It does shift. I loved too when you were talking about the bucket to hold the space instead of the sponge, because I was like, oh, that's such a great visual, because it's like, okay, now there's this hard-sided container, and I'm gonna hold the space and hold your emotions, but I'm not going to take it in. And I think for both partners that because the addict will go to shame probably, or defensiveness, like, no, you don't understand, so they're doing that automatic response. But a partner can go, oh, I can't talk to him about this because it'll trigger him, and like, he's so fragile. And so like, I love the visual. I'm holding this, and I'm here, I got it, but I'm not taking it all in. So that was, super helpful. I loved you when you're talking about the in attunement, the non-defensive for the end, because I was like, oh yeah, it's so easy to go, but you don't understand, and you're not hearing all that I'm doing, and that, like all that, and the empathy is such a hard place for addicts to get to. But boy, it's transformative, and often it's practicing with other addicts, and having the empathy there, and then I can start doing it in my primary relationship, because over here it's safer, and in here it's like, oh, it's scary, I'm going to do this all wrong. But I love to, recovery is a journey. I think it's super helpful to it's not a quick fix, it's doing it consistently, but man, like you said, it's a lifelong journey, but there's such wonderful byproducts, and it is, and I shared today in my personal meeting, like, I am grateful that I didn't arrive, it isn't like, oh, I'm all recovered and I got this all wrapped up, because it's the continuing journey on a daily basis. And I know it feels awful, for partners and even addicts to go, oh my God, this is forever, but to go, yes, but the wonderful byproducts and the connections and the being able to live in integrity, and not have compartmentalization, and all the fracture and hurt, and to learn to do things differently. And for those of us that are parents, grandparents, we get to model something different, then too, and it shows up, it reflects differently. So it's worth the journey. It is, it is just a daily commitment. I don't have to do this forever. I'm doing it for today, and that helps me hold the space for it. So great stuff. As always, I'm going like, oh, I have to get this one posted right away, because like, I got people to send this to. So anyway, first question, and please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A. My husband is right now at our treatment program. When he comes back, I need us to live separately. How do I go about setting this up in the least traumatic way for everyone? So first of all, since he's with us, you have a family specialist that you will be talking to. You have our team is going to talk to you about this. This is not up to you on your own. You have support with our team at Seeking Integrity to do this. But it's a great question for those that aren't in treatment. So let's take it from in a little broader context. So if you've got a couple that is coming, how do you help them create that safe space?
Well, first of all, I love what you said. When we are setting up some type of a separation like this, it's really important that you do it the right way and you do it with somebody who's qualified to help you with this. Of course, we call it a healing separation. You could call it a therapeutic separation because we put boundaries around it and there's a framework around it. So we literally have a 5-page document. Sometimes it will be one therapist who sits down with a couple to work with them. And sometimes it's each person's individual therapist along with, the addict partner, the betrayed partner, the four of, we'll sit down and we will go through. We start out with the goals. What are the goals of a healing therapeutic separation? So we have some general goals. One of them is it's going to create space for each individual person to work on regulating and focusing on their recovery work, and it's not about separating leading to divorce. It's about working on coming back together. And then we also add any of the goals that the partners have during this time apart because we want everybody to be on the same page. It's so important. We also go through on there and we identify what does the recovery work look like for each person. So we literally go into how often you're going to go in for therapy, group work, what kind of self-care you're going to be doing, literally going through, I'm committing to do this while we are apart so that I can continue focusing on me and my recovery work. We go into all the details as far as logistics. We go through things like finances, how's the money going to be taken care of? Who's going to pay for what? Because financial, stability is something that's really important, especially if you happen to be somebody who's not working and your partner is. So you don't want to no longer have any money. So we have an agreement on that. We also have an agreement on what kind of contact that each person will have with other people of the opposite sex during their actual separation. And typically it's going to remain monogamous, that they're focusing on the relationship. So we talk about that. We also talk about if children are involved and the rules around that. And specifically, some of those rules are not putting the children in the middle, not having the children communicate and be the communicator between parties, focusing on the best and the welfare of the children, making sure that they're safe. So we talk specifically about how you can minimize any of the trauma that might happen for the children if parents separate or the distress, because we can minimize that by how we approach it. And then we specifically go through and talk about time spent together as a couple, time spent together as a family, who's going to be with the children when. We talk about living arrangements, where the parties will be, how that's going to work. So we try to cover everything we can possibly think of. We also set a date. It's going to last this long. Sometimes I will have a betrayed partner say, I need 2 months. And then at the end of 2 months, I want to reevaluate, and then I might need 1 more month. There have been times I have recommended it as a therapist when I have a partner that I cannot get to regulate because I've maybe spent 3-4 months. And by then a partner, if they're doing their recovery tools, should be able to regulate. But what's happening is when they're living in the same household with the betrayed partner, the addict partner may not be doing their recovery. And therefore, they are just triggered all the time. They're in a constant trauma response. So what I want to do is I want to get them, in a place where they can create safety for themselves so we can get them regulated, so we can increase their window of tolerance. It's nice to do a therapeutic separation when both parties especially need it for healing. Sometimes the betrayed partner, like I said, needs it so they can kind of calm their system down and get more regulated. Sometimes the addict partner needs it so they can focus more on their own recovery as well.
Oh shoot, I had a question about that. Okay, so what happens if like you've got this agreement, everybody agrees, and then one or the other is not abiding by it, which probably happens 100% of the time. Okay. So how do you handle,
Yeah,
what
yeah, I can think of experience. We worked very thoroughly with a couple. They were going to do an in-house separation, which I'm honestly, as a therapist, I don't see it work very well. They had a 2-story house, so we're going to try to work this out. And I mean, within a week, they had gone against all the boundaries they set. As a therapist, lots of times what I'll do is I'll work with that client individually and kind of go through and say, okay, what's really going on here? Why did we do this? Did we maybe need to change some things? Is this really going to work? It's true. Sometimes one of the persons doesn't abide by it. And so that's when you have to really look at boundaries and what maybe boundaries need to be put in place. And can you maintain those boundaries? Because remember, the goal is we're trying to come back together in a healthier way. That's the purpose for that healing separation. So it can be rather layered and kind of complex, but we try to figure out, okay, what's at the root of all this and where do we need to go with that?
Yeah, well, and I know one of the other things I thought of was because you were talking about giving space, and how it can be difficult, and and you're talking about that with therapeutic separation too. But my sense is, I don't know, but my sense is that often if a partner's pulling away, there's this sense of abandonment, and so like, no, I need you to stay close. I need you to stay close, and even if it's in a negative way, oh, so sorry, a negative way, it's still that, like, like any attention is good attention kind of thing, so having the addict have enough wherewithal to be able to go, it's okay, this person's going to come back to me and it will be better. I was thinking about that with a lot of this stuff. It's like, oh, this is not like automatic, oh, I've been, in recovery 5 minutes and, I'm going to be able to do any of it. Like, this is all things to work towards because, early in recovery, absolutely minimizing, absolutely downplaying, as you justify, like all of those things, coming up with the automatic response, rather than, so I love this. And it's like, okay, I'm going to work on these and I'm going to do some things better than others. One of the other things you talked about was, like it takes the consistent practice. And I was like, yeah, because it's really easy to go, when, well, Debbie, da, 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 and then, oh, well, that didn't work. So, throw the whole thing out rather than going, okay, that didn't work exactly like that. Or, do we need to tweak it? Or was it the way I said it or whatever, so not giving up and continuing the process, looking at more intellectually rather than limbically of like, okay, what can we do differently so that we can have a little more success? So a positive change, not perfection. So yeah, this is
The process.
and for betrayed partners, I know you didn't ask for any of this, and honestly, your addicts didn't really plan. This is the result of their problematic behavior, their addiction, so we make really horrible choices and it's so hurtful to you too. But learning, like you said, the byproducts of recovery, are amazing. So okay, so the next question, I'm a partner, my PA, also SA, but predominantly PA spouse, and I are currently drafting our commitment plan based on Dr. Rob's Out of the Doghouse. What are some suggestions for accountability should be included? Examples for porn addicts. Any other suggestions for commitment plan you may have will be helpful. I feel controlling during this process. What is controlling and what isn't? Oh, this is a great opportunity to talk about controlling versus boundaries. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, couple of things, because you've got several questions in here. What are some suggestions for accountability should be included? Well, I think I've given you a pretty good outline of some things, but with porn addiction, I think that another area that you want to talk about in accountability is making your partner aware of kind of what your template is. here's what I know about me. Here's what I know when I go into, some of those preceding behaviors. And here's kind of my rituals. And then setting up, some accountability around that. So what does that mean? A lot of people, when they're watching porn, they isolate, right? So it means if I'm going to use a computer ever, I'm out in the open, my screen's facing the door where people are walking by. Those are the types of accountability things. So you're going to go to your partner and say, what do you need for safety? What comes to mind? Now, my recommendation would be that you sit down and have a general meeting where you say, let's work on accountability. It sounds like you already have done that. And what is it that you need accountability around right now? What does that look like? And have your partner come up with a list, and you can come up with a list as well, and then coming back together. So with pornography, a lot of it is understanding the preceding behaviors and what are you going to do. It's also accountability on if you do have a slip, what does that look like? It's interesting. Last night we were running, like I said, an introductory, our phase 1 group for sex addiction and betrayal recovery. And one of the women says, we were talking about bottom lines, and one of them raised her hand and said, so when are we going to know our partner's bottom lines? Will they ever share that with us? The answer is yes. You should be sharing your bottom lines. You should also share what are kind of those behaviors leading into it. Your partner's, if they're in a grounded space and they're not limbic, it's going to be so helpful for them to hear it. But you have to add to that, here's what I'm doing currently so that I don't do those behaviors. And sometimes a bottom line could even be something like fantasizing, right? And so what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to do the 3-second rule. Or I'm going to reach out to, this member in group. So be very clear on how you're going to be handling certain situations that may arise. That creates a lot of safety as well. So come back together, talk about what you need, and recognize that accountability needs will change over the course of recovery. So once you kind of help somebody feel safe in one area and that betrayed partner goes, I see he's going to group, I no longer have to worry about that. All of a sudden she's not focusing, or he's not focusing on that as much as maybe they're focusing on a different aspect or going to SA meetings, whatever that is. So make sure that the list is fluid and that you can have it kind of evolve as it needs to. And let me think what else. The commitment plan. I'm assuming that you're both going to kind of come up with it. Talk it over. Don't do it all at once. Take time, break it up. I think sometimes we get on overload. So maybe you're going to talk about 3 things and stop there and, come back and talk about 3 more. I always say approach things well fed, well rested, and feeling grounded. Grounded means that I am in the prefrontal cortex, front part of my brain, where I've got logic, reasoning, emotional regulation, and empathy. That's our executive functioning part of our brain. And I'm not in the mid-back part of my brain, the limbic system, which is that fight, flight, or freeze. If we ever get there, we call a timeout. It's really important that you have these hard conversations. This is a hard conversation to talk about accountability. And sometimes it's hard to have to sit and hear your partner's perspective. But if you can stay grounded in that, take it slow, be very clear. A question to ask would be, what does that look like? What would that look like if I were doing that for you? Here's what I would need to see. So get very, very clear on that. Don't just assume. Okay, the other thing that you asked about was controlling, and what's that difference? Controlling to me is where you are you expect a certain outcome. I call this the black and white thinking, or the picture I have in my mind of how it needs to be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to step into all these behaviors that are going to help me get that person to do what I need them to do to get to the outcome I feel needs to happen. So as a result, I'm usually instructing, I'm telling, I'm directing. I may be a little more punitive and punishing because they're not doing what I want them to do. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to push somebody against their own will. I'm trying to take away their free will to make their own choices, because I want them to do it the way I want them to do it. And that's really hard, because honestly, betrayed partners at times really do have better ideas for their addict partners on how to do their recovery. But it's not up to them to tell them. The addict partner's got to learn that. Whereas with boundaries, I can set up and say, here's what I need for safety. So if you choose to do this, right, I'm not going to feel safe. And as a result, there's a consequence. And the consequence most likely is going to be, I've got to step away from the relationship. Either I've got to separate myself from you, go sleep in another room, not talk to you for the rest of the day because I'm trying to go over here and do some self-care, because that's the consequence. If you choose to do this healthy behavior, and you're doing it, then I'm going to want to be close to you. I'm going to want to have physical touch with you. I'm going to want to talk with you. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm going to share life with you. And as human beings, we love that. We love that human connection. So the difference between the two is, I think boundaries promote connection in a healthy way, whereas controlling is going to lead to more disconnection. So you have to be very careful. And I oftentimes have to check in and go, okay, is this the picture I have in my mind of how it needs to be? And is that the way it has to be? Or can I let this person, walk their own path and their own journey? I oftentimes use the analogy with my clients, and that is, I believe everybody has their own life path that they're walking. And we have experiences, we make choices that lead to certain outcomes, and we have to learn from those. And we have to figure it out ourselves. And oftentimes what we like to do, those of us that think we know a whole lot, like me, is we want to get on somebody else's path, grab their hand and start yanking them down their life's path, saying, hey, I know the way, do it this way. And unfortunately, it doesn't turn out well. And oftentimes I have to step back onto my path and recognize it's up to this person to learn the lesson, to have the experience. But in the meantime, if that person isn't safe, I'm going to put boundaries around it. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't times that if my partner, as they're walking their journey, says, hey, can you come over to my path with me and help me with this? Absolutely. That's what we want to do. So that would not be controlling if they ask you. But if you're constantly telling them how to do it, but we can make that request. Here's what it looks like for me. Would you please do this? And if so I think there needs to be a lot of communication, and sometimes it's really hard, especially when it's so easy for a betrayed partner to go limbic. And remember, an addict partner has been living in that limbic part of their brain, their prefrontal. So it's a process, like we've said. So just try. That's my recommendation. Try, make the mistake, sit down and learn from it, and then repeat that.
So helpful. I did put in the chat on seeking integrity. We have Out of the Doghouse work group that is really helpful for guys at getting some practical information. If he hasn't already done the Sex Addiction 101 or the and honestly, since you said both, the PA 101 or the Sex Addiction 101, I think a better fit for the Sex Addiction 101. Those are foundational components too, and I agree with Debbie. Try, but if you need a little help, work with a qualified professional to help you navigate this. I mean, that's what they do, is help that. I also think, I think it's challenging, because if you guys both can remember that the goal is to find a way to navigate a relationship together, that's what our goal is. So we've got that as the goal. And so an addict is always going to go, I want to do less. I want to make this go away. Like you said earlier, I want the quick fix. Like, okay, I'll do this and this, poof, and get over it. No. So, but this is what we need to do to build that trust so that we're on the path together. I often think about it. It's kind of like you're on these tracks and you're looking to build the bridge across. How do you build that bridge? And building the bridge is trust. I think for partners, trust your gut too, because if you feel like something's being negotiated, but you feel like you're being manipulated, you are, so understand, like, and it's okay, like Debbie said, to say, okay, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to think about this, and then I'll come back to you, because then you can process with hopefully some other betrayed partners, or same with addicts. If it's feeling like it's, I talk to lots of people, and sometimes it's like, well, I shouldn't need to do this because I'm doing fine with my recovery. But if your partner is going, I really need this, I really need this for this, you know, and it's a good recovery thing, just do it. Just do it, and you know what? You'll probably get some benefit from it anyway, but the digging my heels in and going, no, I don't need this. No, I don't need this, if it's good for the relationship, if the building the bridge on that relationship is good, then you know what? Investing a little more time in doing something that you don't think maybe is necessary is still okay. So, oh, we are out of time. Oh, gosh, that went fast. Thank you. I've got notes and highlights and everything else. I'll hopefully get this one posted. So thank you to those of you joining and asking questions. We always appreciate that. Watch the calendar for through the end of the year, because there are some things that are not on the calendar for the holidays, but we look forward to continuing this journey with you. Grateful for your questions. Grateful for you, Debbie, as always. So
Thank you so
thanks,
much.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.